Charge of History. Welcome back from break. We missed you guys so much. It's great to see you back. Today's essential question is, how did the Catholic Church unite Europe during the Middle Ages? With only 25 history classes left until you crush our iLeap, getting mastery in advanced, let's see what you remember from Unit 5, from when we studied China. Remember that last week before we went to break, we started a new unit. It was about the fall of Rome in the Middle Ages. We talked about the Black Plague and how devastating it was for the people of Europe. Do you remember, why did the Black Plague spread so quickly among European cities? So even though looking back now, we know how the plague was spread, through rats and fleas and germs, back then, medical knowledge was very limited. People thought that God had sent the plague as a punishment to humanity. Christians in Europe were extremely afraid of God and his anger. They saw him as easily angered and quick to punish. Remember how the ancient Mesopotamians left statues in the temples to prevent their gods from getting angry? Well, Christians in the Middle Ages were the same way. They really wanted to keep their God happy. Let's learn more about religion in the Middle Ages. Make sure to follow along and annotate your passage. You know how to annotate, and this is a great way to maintain the 4.0 GPA that you have right now by getting 100% on your practice grade. All right, here we go. The Catholic Church was the center of medieval life in Western Europe. Catholicism is a type of Christianity. In the Middle Ages, almost every village and town had a church building. But larger towns and cities had what was called a cathedral. Cathedrals are huge churches with ornate, beautiful architecture. Church bells rang out the hours, called people to worship, and warned of danger. The church building was the center of community activity. Religious services were held several times a day. Can you imagine going to church like 3 times a day? Some people did that. Town meetings, plays, and concerts were also held in the churches. Merchants had ships around the square in front of the church. Farmers also sold their produce in the square. Markets, festivals, and fairs were all held in the shadow of the church's spires, or towers. The church provided education for some people, and it also helped the poor and the sick. The church encouraged and paid for a lot of scientific research and the study of old Roman and Greek culture. The church was a daily presence throughout a person's life, from birth to death. People also looked to the church to explain world events. Storms, disease, and famine were thought to be punishments sent by God. People hoped that prayer and religious devotion would keep away such disasters. They were even more concerned about the fate of their souls after they died. The church taught that salvation, or the saving of a person's soul, would come to those who followed the church's teaching. All medieval people, be they village peasants or townspeople, they believed that God, heaven, and hell all existed. From the very earliest of ages, the people were taught that the only way they could get to heaven was if the Roman Catholic Church let them. Everybody would have been terrified of hell, and people would have been told of the sheer horrors awaiting them in hell in the weekly services they attended. The control the Catholic Church had over people was total. So then who was in charge of the Catholic Church? Well, the Pope was, and still is today, the head honcho of the Catholic Church. This is Pope Francis. He's the Pope right now, and he lives in Rome, in a place called Vatican City. This was Pope Gregory from the Middle Ages. He also lived in Rome. That's where the church has always been headquartered. But from then and now, the Pope is the one in charge of the Catholic Church. Popes were extremely powerful in medieval Europe, when everyone did exactly what the church told them to. Think about it. The church is in charge of everybody, and the Pope is in charge of the church. They have a lot of power. In fact, popes were so powerful that most kings hated them. Because think about it, the kings were trying to be the ones in charge, but the popes were more powerful than them. There was usually a power struggle between the church and between the king and the pope. But there was one emperor who got along well with the Pope. His name was Emperor Charlemagne. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, and Pope Adrian, who is the head of the Catholic Church, were very good friends. This is the two of them together. They liked each other. They respected each other. They both understood the importance of teamwork to get a job done. For about 25 years, when Charlemagne was the king and Adrian was the pope, these two men worked together to rule much of medieval Europe. Charlemagne means Charles the Great in Latin. People in Europe respected this king a lot. Thanks to their combined efforts, the pope and the king, by 800 CE, pretty much all the people in Western Europe had converted to the Catholic Church. So this is what we're looking at here. This whole entire territory, if you look at the blue in the key, was Charlemagne's empire. So this is the part that Charlemagne had united. And then the green were territories that he added before he died. So the green became part of his territory too. With the help of the Pope and Charlemagne working together, all of these people throughout Europe started converting to Catholicism and listening to the Pope and following the directions of both the Pope and Charlemagne. This was the first time that people started thinking of Europe as one continent with one common culture, like we still do today. Go ahead and pause and summarize that last paragraph. So now you know how the Catholic Church united Europe. It took what used to be different kingdoms and united them under one person's rule. Think about who was responsible for that. Now go back to your playlist and you're going to watch a short video that shows Pope Francis, who's our Pope today. You can see a little bit what it's like to be the Pope.